Hello, my wonderful listeners. This is Hua. Thank you for tuning in today. I am here to share a new story called Lonely is Never You, a romantic historical comedy for your enjoyment. Here we meet Princess Quintessa, who is decreed to marry Prince Gunnar, the king and queen's son, due to her father's gambling debts. Now, they are as different as night and day, especially when Prince Gunnar moonlights as a pirate during the day and wears the tunic of a prince at night. I found myself smiling a lot writing this, so I do hope that you enjoy with me. This is written in first person, shifting point of view. Enjoy.
The wind is playing with your hair. I'm watching it painting circles in the air. You're smiling at me like only you could do, like a perfect dream, and that dream is you. The sun is lighting up your face. We stayed up all night and listened to the rain, like music kept on playing like a drum. With you in my arms, I'm the lucky one, and I wanna spend the day making love 1,000 ways and more to show. Baby, every time we're kissing, I know it is forbidden, but I can't stop. No, I can't stop. Your body's on my body. I know you really got me, 'cause I can't stop. No, I can't stop. Even if I'm trying, I could never pull away.
Quintessa. I am to leave here, my home, and pay off a debt that is not even mine to begin with? I asked this question as I sat in my chamber, watching the birds in front of me drink water. I felt my heart sink heavily into my soul and shut my eyes as my maid Kinsley finished doing my hair. She was quiet after she relayed the message to me. What else could she say? She had been with me from when I turned into a young girl, and her being a young girl herself, the two of us kept each other company. I made sure whatever jewels I was given, she wore it as well, keeping her polished. My lady, I do not know of any offers that would help heal your heart, but the chance of finding a way out is slim. Your father's debt to the king is now being called upon, and without proper payment, you are the only thing he has left to give. I lowered my head and felt the hot tears slipping down my cheeks. If only my mother was alive, she would prevent this. But no, she was buried 6 feet under where the worms were surrounding her. I lifted my head and wiped my cheeks gently, forcing the hot air out of my mouth. I stood and took her hands, pulling her toward me, her eyes telling me the pain she also felt with me. Kinsley, I envy you. You have a choice to say no. A smile broke through her sad face, and she replied, My lady, you have always been kind to me, and seeing you suffer like this brings me to a saddened state that I cannot help you. Shrugging my shoulders, I replied, So be it. If my father is to wed me to someone I barely know, I suppose I can only nod and agree. The decree is from the king himself, and if I argue, I could be put to death. I suppose life in the royal court won't be too bad. She smiled. That's another way to think of it, my lady. Come, let me help you dress so you can go meet the king and queen who has brought their son to meet you. I am sure, seeing how beautiful the queen is, her son will be quite handsome. I smirked. Handsome or not, he and I will be strangers and enemies for a lifetime. I reached up my hands and Kinsley slipped the purple gown over me, tightening the gold sash around my waist, accentuating my curves, and she put on a pair of gold teardrop earrings on my lobes before the two of us made our way down to the hall where I heard voices conversing. I'd never met the king or queen, and they were imperial families that I did not want to be involved in, but now I was about to become their daughter-in-law. When I entered the meeting hall, I saw a beautiful, mature woman wearing a golden gown with a crown on her head, with a handsome older man. Both sported white hair as my father, Lord Felix, sat with a sad smile in his chair. The king and queen looked at me as both Kinsley and I dropped to our knees. Greetings to your majesty, king and queen of Ruyan, I said. Rise, my darling girl, Queen Everly said as she smiled. I stood up and walked to them, where she reached out and took my hands. Oh my, you are more beautiful than I imagined. You will be perfect for my gunner. Husband, look, isn't she a gem? The king smiled and nodded in agreement. Your reputation does not lie. I blushed and lowered my head. You are much too kind. Then Queen Everly looked over her shoulder at an older woman with white hair standing by the doorway. Baylor, where is that son of mine? The woman stepped forward and bowed her head. Your Highness, the prince is on his way. Always late, she hissed, and then she smiled at me. You are going to make a beautiful bride. I didn't respond. And then loud yelling and hooting was heard as horse hooves arrived outside. Both the king and queen exchanged looks and nervously looked at me. I turned my attention to the door when a handsome young man with a tanned complexion walked in, with shoulder-length hair. He was smiling, although his opened vest was showing off more skin than needed. Queen Everly let my hand go and she stood up. Dalton, where is your brother? He smiled, a handsome expression indeed, as he bowed. Mother, father, my brother is indisposed at the moment and sent me in his place. What ruckus is this? King Tobias shouted as he stood and walked to his son. What on earth could keep him from meeting his bride? The man, called Dalton, smiled and shrugged as he crossed his muscular arms. I heard it was a new shipment of trade to make him richer. Fool, King Tobias said. Then he turned around to face me. Princess Quintessa, meet my adopted son, Prince Dalton, the calmer of the two. I turned to find the prince smile at me with his arms still crossed. Prince Dalton? He smiled and nodded. Princess Quintessa, you are beautiful, but not quite the look my brother adores. I blushed as his mother hushed him. I lowered my gaze, embarrassed, as I knew his brother probably had better-looking women. I didn't answer as the king turned toward my father. Lord Felix, forgive this indecent display of introduction. I shall make sure my son is present the day of the wedding. You need not be concerned. For now I shall collect your daughter and have her hurry to my manor in preparation. I shall see you in 2 weeks. I shifted my attention to my father, who had tears in his eyes, and he looked ready to cry. He only nodded and didn't say a single word to me. I felt my heart heavy, as I didn't expect that I would leave right away. I turned to find Kinsley watching me with sad eyes, and I looked at the king and queen. Your Highness, may I ask a favor? Queen Everly smiled and replied, Of course, dearest. What is it? May I ask that my maidservant come with me? I have had her with me since a young child, and I am used to only her. The queen smiled and nodded her head. Of course. While we have been speaking, my servants have already packed your things. Let us go now. They stood, and she reached out a hand to me. I took it, and when I turned to my father, he simply looked away, and I knew I would never get a last word. I walked out with her, and out the door as I heard nothing but a deep sigh from him. The ride to the palace imperial place was long and filled with emotions that taunted me. Kingsley sat beside me in a separate envoy, and total there were 6 envoys traveling together. I lifted the curtain and looked outside to see nothing but vast openness in the sky. My lady, the adopted son was quite handsome. What an entrance he made, Kinsley said as she blushed. I turned to look at her. Did you like him? She shrugged and laughed loudly. Well, he is a daredevil, I say. He is adopted, which means his brother may not even look like him. That is the truth, my lady. But I believe with the queen's beauty and the king's stance, your future husband will be a very handsome man. The thought didn't make me feel any better. I simply lowered my head and thought to myself, but he didn't think meeting me was important enough, so he sent his brother instead. My heart was heavy, not just about his absence, but also my father's lack of love toward me. He didn't say a single word, and I felt as if I wasn't worthy of a daughter to him. If my mother was alive, she would have prevented this from happening and given me a chance to love, for her right to love was also stripped. She was forced to marry my father, and look where that got her, dead as a doornail. My lady, what are you thinking? Kingsley asked. I shrugged and looked at my hands. It is so unfair and unjust, Kingsley, to be born a woman with no option in future. I am to abide at my husband's beck and call and listen as if I am not able to feel. Where in the world did the universe believe that women were meant to be handled this way? Kingsley reached over and took my hands. My lady, stop this nonsense. You need to have a better mind for where you're going. The imperial family is not a place where you can have such wicked thoughts. I looked up at her. Exactly, Kingsley, and I may not survive. I am not strong enough to fight for my right to live well. I am used to just being silent about everything. When put in a situation where I must become aggressive, I shut down and become a mime. How shall I survive the world of the imperial court? She smiled and tapped my hands. Have you forgotten about me? I will be here to help you. I smiled and looked away as my mind ventured to the beginning of time with the two of us. We were truly like sisters from separate mothers because our thoughts ran the same, and she was the perfect company to my lonely life. My mother had died right when I needed her the most, leaving me to fend for everything. When my father brought her to the manor, I saw her and I took her hands, wanting to keep her for myself. And Kingsley and I became two souls that sung ballads to each other to sleep. I became a stronger person because of her, and she learned to become humble of me. We grew up and grew even better as one. The envoy came to a stop, and I lifted the curtains to look out at the sprawling mansion before me. Here we go, I thought as the door opened and a servant put a pair of stairs for me to climb down. The king and queen were already waiting for me at the entrance hall, where a line of servants stood with trays of flowers to welcome me. Princess Quintessa, come, the queen ushered me. I walked to her, and she took my hand, leading me behind the king and Prince Dalton. We were walking slowly, and I noticed the huge giant dragon had built before the entrance. It looked almost alive as we walked underneath it and into the mansion home, where more servants welcomed me. You must be exhausted, Queen Everly said, as she took my hand, leading me to the dining hall, where a table was set up with grand food. We will eat first, and then you can rest. I will have some snacks and fruit brought to you later. Thank you, Your Highness. Oh, no, 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 she said as she waved a finger at me. You now call me Imperial Mother. I blushed and nodded. Yes, Imperial Mother. When dinner was over and I was finally alone in the extra large chamber, I plopped down on the bed and let out a deep sigh. Kingsley was being shown around the mansion grounds, and I was feeling a bit sad about my situation. Although the queen was kind to me, I felt so alone, and the tears that threatened to come spilled over my cheeks. I covered my face and began sobbing endlessly. If only my father had been a decent man to think about his daughter in life, we would never have this situation. But the world didn't matter to him. Only his gambling addict did. And he sold his title, his lands, and now he finally got rid of me. I was exhausted of taking care of everyone, and I just wanted to be freed from the life given to me. I wanted to be loved and taken care, to be seen, and to be given a chance to be with the man I loved. not decreed to marry someone. I was sobbing so hard I didn't hear when the door to the balcony opened and he walked in. I was so focused on my pain that when I opened my eyes and saw the pair of black boots before me, I lifted my head up to see a handsome, tall man with a sun-tanned body rippled with muscles aching to be touched, tattoos that covered him from one arm to the other, and his dark eyes staring at me with such intensity I felt my sobs vanish. I have a rule in my chamber, woman. Tears can only come from my pleasure as you lay beneath me.
I wanna get too close, gonna get it right now. I wanna push all the limits with you right now. So what's your feelings? The city's screaming, we're not coming home tonight. We're living quick in this world, gonna get it right now. People talk and tell what you wanna hear now.
Gunner. Who was this babbling woman in my chamber? Was she supposedly my bride-to-be? I hadn't returned in time from my trip to make it to meet her. I had found out just 2 days ago about this marriage arrangement, and I fought against it. But my father had put his foot down. If I had a woman to marry, then bring her in, and he would make this new one my concubine. Well, I didn't believe in concubines, mainly because my father didn't either. I hated the idea of women fighting over me over stupid things. I valued my peace. But this woman who was crying before me was a stranger, and yet her cries were tearing my heart apart. She looked too gentle to be a gambling addict's daughter. She wiped her eyes and stood up, away from me, her eyes telling me she was frightened. Who are you? I crossed my arms, making myself appear larger than I seemed. She had no idea who I was. Should I play around? No, Gunner. She was already frightened enough. She was probably crying because she also didn't want this marriage. I let my arms go, releasing the image of being bolder than I needed to be. You must be Princess Quintessa, I asked. She nodded. When did you arrive? Just moments ago. What are you doing in my chamber? Laughing, I replied. Your chamber? You think this is your chamber. Isn't it? She asked, her eyebrows raising in question. Smiling, I replied, Look around you, princess. What kind of setting is this chamber? That was when she finally took in the items set around the room, and her eyes returned to me, realizing that this indeed was a chamber occupied by a man. Why would I be put in a man's chamber? She asked. Perhaps because that man is the husband you are about to marry. Then what are you doing in this chamber? I stepped forward and smiled, watching the fear heightened in her eyes as I closed the distance between us. I am that husband. I watched as her eyes widened and she stepped back until her back hit the wall, leaving no room to escape. I continued walking toward her until my arms were within reach of her waist. The breath that came from her was ragged and uneven as she tried to figure out a way how to run. Were you not warned of the type of man I was? I asked. Shaking her head, she replied, No, you missed the greeting of my manner, and I was forced to meet your brother instead. Laughing, I replied, Yes, indeed, I am guilty of that. But my brother isn't a bad-looking fellow to take my place to bring you here to me. However, seeing as how easy on the eyes you are, I think I should keep you closed off to others from now on. She didn't answer me, and I stopped taunting her as I pulled back immediately. She let out a breath of relief, and I smiled. I won't touch you, princess, but that doesn't mean others can. On paper, it states that you are my wife. I run a very tight business of trading goods, and I am not always home. The kind of work I do is not safe to bring women like you around. You were forced into this agreement as much as I was. So for the time being, I don't think you will mind if I'm absent from home. She shrugged and straightened herself. I have much better things to do than moon after a man who isn't fond of my presence. I raised my eyebrows and a smile appeared on my face. Quite petty, aren't we? I shall keep in mind the choice of words you like to use and be sure to match in rhythm. And then I turned toward the closet where my clothes hung and opened the door. Get changed. Tonight is a gala where you will be introduced. She stepped forward and let out a shriek before I could remove my vest. You cannot simply undress here, Prince. Why not? I asked as I turned to walk toward her. Well, for one, I am still here and do not wish to see anything indecent. And for another, where are my clothes? I pointed to the closet where the servants had already took the liberty of hanging them all in a row. Neatly taken care of. You can walk out and wait in the hall while I get ready. I do not require too much time, and I think I do see your maid lingering out there. She dropped a curtsy and hurried out the door, where I heard her call out her maid. A moment later the door closed, and I heard Reese's voice calling for me. My lord, do you require assistance? He asked. I walked out to find my servant, since a child, watching me with gentle eyes. This man has seen me from infant to young boy to now a man. Reese, did you get a look at my bride? I asked as he came forward and helped me to button my tunic. My prince, anyone who can see will agree that your bride is a beautiful woman and that you are a very lucky man. Smiling, I replied, Good Lord, Reese, are you trying to gain favor with me? You have never been this polite before, you old fool. Laughing, he replied, My lord, you have spent too much time in the sun, and it has warped you good. Your bride arrived very lonely and very sad. I do feel for her, my lord. As you would say, I whispered as he finished tugging my tunic, and then I heard the sound of feet dropping from the balcony and turned to find my brother Dalton making his way in. He saw Reese's glare and laughed as he plopped down on the bed and made himself comfortable. Young prince, you are too much of a daredevil. There are doors for purposes, Reese said. Which I do not use. Ever, Dalton said. Thank you for bringing home my bride, I said as I walked to where he was lying down and kicked his leg. He only laughed and sat up as I ran my hands through my hair. How was her reaction to seeing you? Dalton shrugged his shoulders. Quite shocked, to be frank. And her father was even worse. That man didn't even say one single word to her when she left, and the poor girl was waiting for a kind farewell. I felt my heart sink at the mention of this. Why would a father not bid his own daughter farewell? What kind of father would sell his daughter to relieve his debts? Good question, I replied as I turned to him. Get dressed and then attend the gala. Father requests that we not be late. I made my way into the grand hall where flowers were being set everywhere in different shades. The servants were running around making last-minute adjustments, and as I rounded the corner, my parents came in, holding hands, wearing all gold, their crowns set neatly on their heads. I lowered myself to one knee and greeted them. Greetings to you, imperial mother and father. May you have longevity and good wealth. Rise up, my son, my mother said as she helped me to stand. Where is my daughter-in-law? She's getting dressed as we speak. You be kind to her, do you hear? She has had one roller coaster since she has left her home. So I heard. And at that moment, she came down the spiraling staircase with her maid trailing behind her. The green gown she wore made it look like a gem right out of heaven, and my breath caught in my throat. I'd never felt this way at the simple entrance of a woman before. My mother noticed, and she nudged me forward as I coughed and controlled myself. I walked to meet her at the foot of the stairs, and she gave me a weak smile. I am not sure how to address you, she said. Well, Gunnar can't simply do, as that might get you into trouble. My lord shall do, and I promise I will answer. Her eyes brightened, and she bowed. My lord. I extended a hand, and she took it. Out of an act or fear? I wasn't sure. But we walked to where my parents stood, and we both bowed as she greeted them. You look like a gem, my mother proclaimed. This gala will introduce you to a lot of new people, and your head might spin later. If that happens, be sure to come get me so I can execute an escape plan for you. She smiled. Thank you, Your Highness. So, my mother got the genuine smile, while I received the forced one. I wanted to roll my eyes as I took her hand, and we headed toward the banquet hall where Dalton appeared with a smile. He bowed to my wife and I as he hurried toward the female servants to flirt. Some things never change. And speaking of things never changing, as soon as the doors opened for guests to enter, who should walk in but Lady London wearing a bright pink gown with an extravagant headpiece. London and I had shared more than just hearts and a romance. We were actually almost headed toward the altar at one point, until she became pregnant, even before I ever touched her. What an eye-opening for me that was about a woman who looked like London and came from a rich background of society ballers. I leaned toward my mother. Who invited London? My mother turned and caught her entering. Her mouth dropped open as she let out a heavy breath. I certainly did not. She must have caught wind of it from one of her high society friends. If she causes a scene, I shall have her removed. Have who removed? Quintessa asked beside me. I turned to her and forced a smile. No one of importance. Gunnar, as your future wife, she deserves the right to know about every leech involved in you, my mother said as she took the hand of Quintessa and pulled her aside. You see that woman who is wearing that ridiculous last year color? I watched as my future bride nodded her head. Well, my idiot son here used to think she was the one to claim her place as his bride. They were once a hot and heavy item until she showed up with a bump when the two hadn't even exchanged bodily fluids. Mother, I said annoyed, could you be less descriptive? You were the one who saw something in her, not me, she said. Anyways, when this was found out, Gunnar broke the relationship, but she has yet to get over him. If her claws come out, I give you full permission to gouge her eyes out. I laughed. Wow, a queen you are, mother, and such words to come from you. A woman I am before I am a queen, and I am only protecting my daughter-in-law, my boy. She returned Quintessa to me, and she walked off with my father as I let out a deep breath. I hated galas, and I just wanted to be back on my ship, feeling the wind against my face. Do you still love her? Quintessa asked quietly beside me. I turned to her and almost swallowed my tongue. That is not only insane, but also insulting to me, princess. She lowered her face. I just want to know what I am up against. Nothing. You are up against nothing. There has been no woman since her, and now it is only you, which is a strange practice for me, as I am always around women. You should consider yourself quite lucky to grab me. She lowered her eyes and whispered, It is not as if I wanted this. Before I could answer her, London strolled over, and the smell of jasmine stung my nose, reminding me of our past. Good evening, Prince Gunnar. It has been a long time since I've seen you. It seems I was the last best thing ever in your life, she said with a sneer. Lady London, ever the gracious lady you are, to enter our palace walls stating a fashion statement as only you can do. How has society been for you since we parted? I watched her eyes shift to Quintessa and then back to me, her emotion not hidden. Boring, and making me age faster than needed. Where have you been hiding? I heard you just returned home and didn't even welcome your own bride. You hear too much, don't you? I asked. She laughed and crossed her arms, fixing her headpiece. I do spend a lot of time in high places. There. You hear a lot of things. And then she focused her eyes to Quintessa. I am so sorry, darling. Here I am blubbering on and on about our past history together when I have yet to introduce myself to you. And to my utter shock and surprise, my bride answered, "No need. I know exactly who you are by last year's fashion on your body." Thank you for tuning in. Chapter 2 will be out shortly.
The wind is playing with your hair. I'm watching it painting circles in the air. You're smiling at me like only you could do, like a perfect dream, and that dream is you. The sun is lighting up your face. We stayed up all night and listened to the rain, like music kept on playing like a drum. With you in my arms, I'm the lucky one. And I wanna spend the day making love 1,000 ways and more to show. Baby, every time we're kissing, I know it is forbidden, but I can't stop. No, I can't stop. Your body's on my body, I know you really got me, 'cause I can't stop. No, I can't stop. Even if I'm trying, I could never pull away. And when we are, girl, I can't stop. No, I can't stop. When we are, girl, I can't stop. No, I can't stop. From people telling her to leave, that she won't have a future here with me. No, I've done my best, I've tried to prove them wrong. They ain't listening, but I know that she's the one. And I wanna spend the day, make love 1,000 ways and more to show. Baby, every time we're kissing, I know it is forbidden, but I can't stop. No, I can't stop. Your body's on my body, I know you really got me, 'cause I can't stop. No, I can't stop. Even if I'm trying, I could never go away. And when we are, girl, I can't stop. No, I can't stop. When we are, girl, I can't stop. No, I can't stop. Can't stop. Can't stop now. Can't stop. Can't stop now. The sun is lighting up your face. We stayed up all night and listened to the rain, like music it kept on playing like a drum. I'm the lucky one.